Evening everyone, hello. Right, let's have a look. Stuff. Have I got stuff ready? I have got stuff ready, maybe. So, evening. So the way we usually do these, of course, is I try and start on something that might be roughly a consistent topic for at least 10 minutes. It might go on for like 20, 30 minutes, who knows? Before we just go out into random questions, because otherwise you can end up skipping across different topics, and someone watching this, as most people do, not live, will go, what is he even about? So I'll get through a few here, and then I thought we would probably start off with the fact that actually politics is going to be beginning again this week. Although Parliament's not really going to be doing very much, Liz Truss has to. Liz Truss has got a lot of important things to get out this week, which won't be make or break as such, but will certainly decide whether she hits the ground running or just hits the ground. But I will go through a couple of things first. I say in my video today, this will be the one on schools. I get told I'm punishing my kids. They go to local state school, my peers don't. On principle, I must. I'm involved in the PTA. It's hard work, greater good or a fool. It is very difficult. If I don't have children, but if I had children and I was thinking about it, would you send them to private school or not? See, here's the thing. Obviously, you want to do your best for your children. And a private school, never mind the politics, a private education is fundamentally better. You get... I mean, I'm not talking about the Eatons and things like that. They don't necessarily even have that great an academic record. But, you know, just your normal bog standard private school that will exist in any town. No one really knows about it. It's just, you have such a small children to teacher ratio. Each child can get more focus. I have a little bit of personal experiences, not as a teacher. So when I was very young, in what would these days be called year 1 or 2, infant school basically, I actually went to private school. You know, my parents put me in private school. Now my parents weren't wealthy at the time, so it was actually very expensive. It lasted 2 years and then I was oiked out and back into state education. Well, I say back, never actually went into state education in the first place. But yeah, so my first 2 years of formal education were in a private school, and then it was into the local junior school. And I can tell you the difference was absolutely enormous. You know, the private school, you know, I would have been, for those outside this country, between the ages of 4 and 6 years old. And we were just learning so much, including French. We were having lessons in French. That when I went to the local junior school, I learned nothing for years. Absolutely nothing. You know, I could already read. Like, I was reading Lord of the Rings in junior school. I could already read. I could, you know, the maths that they were trying to do, I would basically sit there, but it actually made me lazy because the work given to me was too easy. It was like imagine you, as an adult, being given some work for a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old. You wouldn't be eager to do it, would you? You'd be bored. Why would you do this? And if someone like compelled you to do it, you would just do it really quickly and then set it aside and sit there. And I would sit there. I wouldn't even ask for more work. I would just sit there. So it made me very lazy. But it did give me that really good insight into the difference. And it's immense. So there is that side of it. The problem is, I would also be very keen from a social point of view not to... I would worry that the kids would end up being effectively spoilt. Now, you know, when I talked about, that's going to be what this talks about, isn't it? Like, you know, my parents, I would say they're actually quite good in a couple of ways. One is that although I said my parents weren't wealthy at that time, like my dad worked for British Rail, my mum was a nurse, right? And but still, it was too much. You know, they lasted it for a couple of years because they were wanting, you know, for the best for us, but it was unsustainable. But later on, my dad actually did become more wealthy. Thanks for privatisation. Thanks to the Tories. But anyway, never mind that. The point is that they were quite good in not letting us be spoilt. So later on, when they did have more money, You know, my desk was still like a flat pack desk in my bedroom. We had everything we needed. We didn't go without, but we didn't have things lavished on us. So we didn't get spoilt, basically. I would worry that, you know, it could create kids that are a bit elitist, you know, and that you end up like Liz Truss's father with a child that's basically Liz Truss, and you think, oh, crap. So I think on balance, obviously it wouldn't be just up to me. If I had children, there'd be another parent involved, and their decision would also be important. But I would probably consider that I would send them to state education for two reasons. First of all, I think they'd be more grounded. But secondly, I would imagine that I could compensate by making sure that I helped them study at home as well. I encouraged them to study more at home. So I would make sure that they also got the benefits of more attention by giving it to them myself outside of school time. But that's my view anyway. But I think it is genuinely a tricky one. If you can afford to send your kids to a private education, from a purely educational point of view, I mean, there's a reason why people pay for it. It is better. It's not necessarily that the teachers are better, but they don't have as many kids. And also, they don't have arseholes. Well, they will have arseholes in the class, but they won't be arseholes in the class. You know, I've worked in state schools. I never managed it. I never cracked it. I ended up being a decent college teacher. I never worked out how to do it in schools. I don't know how you deal with the disruption. I was never any good at that. You don't have that. I think in private schools, I'm not saying it's easy life for a teacher, because I imagine you get the parents of thick kids demanding too much or blaming you because their little Johnny isn't getting the grades, when basically that's because they're thick and lazy. But anyway, how can I claim to be a socialist or monarchist? Because they've got nothing to do with each other. The monarchy doesn't decide things. It's nothing to do with each other. Socialism is the concept that the state should essentially control the means of production. That's all it is. Anything else that people tack onto it is something else. You know, ultimately, socialism is the belief that the public are best served by having public services managed by the government. Socialism is the opposite of capitalism, not monarchism. And monarchy, you can have a socialist monarchy. And the thing is as well, I mean, I'm not in favour of a feudal monarchy system. We don't have a feudal monarchy system. We have a constitutional monarchy system. The monarch does not decide policy. They don't manage the government. They don't decide budgets or anything like that. They're no part of government. The government of any country is split into three parts: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. And the Queen or the King now, no part of any of them. So it's really not any conflict on any level at all. But anyway, let's have a look. Go through some other ones as well, because I've obviously now already decided we're not going to have a firm topic on this one. With conference season ahead of us, will Starmer be able to control the current murmurings from the left? And it does still remain a thorn in the party side. Again, I always balk when people say the left, because it's like, well, I'm on the left. But I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to maintain the Tories in government. Obviously, they're going to cause trouble at the conference. We know that, you know, people are going to make an issue of the fact that Labour, in terms of the strikes, whose fault is it that we need to strike? Well, not me personally, but that people need to strike. It's the Tory. It's the government. That people aren't striking because they like to have a strike now and then. They're striking because they cannot afford the cost of living. They're working. They're wealth creators. These are hard workers creating the wealth of the country, but none of the wealth is filtering down to them. You know, they're not feeling the benefits of the fact that we're one of the richest countries in the world. And they would like to think, well, hang on a minute, can we actually at least have a comfortable life for our labourers? Can we at least not have to panic about basic bills? Can we have a nice, clean, warm home, clothes, food to fill our bellies, you know, some money so that we can enjoy being one of the most advanced civilizations in the world. Can we just have that, please? And the Tories have turned around and says, no, get back to your grindstone. So, but instead of attacking the Tories, I mean, most are, to be fair, most are focused on the fact that this is caused by the Tory government. So I don't want to like lump everyone in. But there are some that just decide they want to bash Labour over it. And some of it is just stupidity. Some of it I think is deliberate. And I've said it time and again. I'll carry on saying it. I think it's deliberate because they want the Tories in power. Because they want someone to attack. They want to be able to moan at the establishment. So they want the Tory establishment in place. But anyway. But yeah, they're going to disrupt the Labour Party conference. I've already factored that in. Doesn't matter. Most of the important thing is, will any of this spill over into like from the, because when people ask, for example, why is it that moderate Tories allow the ERG to cause so much damage to their country and their party? Why have they allowed it? All they had to do 8 years ago was tell them to sit down and shut up. Sit down and shut up. You know, John Major used to. Why aren't the current Tory leaders doing that? Why have they not been doing this since Cameron? And the answer is because they are pathologically obsessed with this idea of unity. They know that a disunited party will not win the election. But no political party is really united, none of them, not even the ones that appear to be. So what matters is the appearance of unity. So people trying to undermine Labour from within the Labour movement are a problem if it spills out into the perception of target voters, like ordinary voters. If it doesn't, it's not a big deal. The Labour Party conference is a big event within the Labour movement. It is not a big event on the calendar of ordinary voters. They'll sort of know it's going on because the news will tell them. But the bottom line is, if the news doesn't make a big deal about any like Barneys for Keir Starmer, the normal target voting public will know nothing about it. And as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter. You know, the conference will be derailed in terms of the things I want to come out of it, which is getting the party ready for the next election. We'll just have to see. There are people going along just to derail the whole process. Am I going to the Labour conference? No. No. I can't imagine any valid reason for me to go. I can watch if I want to watch it, and quite frankly this year I don't even want to watch it. They stream it. I can watch. I've watched the last quite a few actually. I've watched the last few. But this year, I don't think I'll bother. You asked about the conference issue because, as sure as eggs are eggs, the Tory press will try to make capital of it given half a chance. The question is, though, will they? Because it's next weekend, right? I'm pretty sure there's going to be some other big news stories happening. Remember, this coming week is Liz Truss's first proper week of government. That was sort of taken by the death of the Queen. So this week, even though Parliament's not really in session, they're coming back on Friday, last possible minute, just to pass her emergency budget, for which there'll be no serious scrutiny, at least not yet. So it'll all go through on the nod. It has to. No one really, no major party dare really vote against it as such, because it's needed to help people with their energy bills. So it'll all go through on the nod, and it'll be quite terrible when people actually do start to look at the detail of it, which we've not been given in advance. But she's got a lot of other things on as well. So she's meeting a lot of world leaders tomorrow, really, tomorrow and Tuesday. You know, she's going to New York to the UN. She's going to speak to the UN on Tuesday, I think it is. So there's quite a lot on. Liz Truss is giving a speech to the UN. Now, we know what Liz Truss is like for giving speeches. It could be quite bad. Although I have heard, I can't remember where it was. It's probably The Guardian, actually. But I saw someone saying that privately, people aren't that worried about it, because we know that Liz Truss has the capacity to make a massive balls up of any speech, right? But we were reminded that when Boris Johnson gave the equivalent speech, he was criticising Kermit the Frog. I mean, you think so? I mean, I think some people are sort of thinking, well, Liz Truss may make some slips, but she probably won't be as bad as Boris Johnson, who told he went banged on about Pepper the Pig to business leaders and talked to world leaders and bashed Kermit the Frog, saying he shouldn't have sung "It's Not Easy Being Green." So I think they're judging the fact that Liz Truss will still be a step up from Boris Johnson. You say, if they're pathologically looking for unity, why are they so against the union? No, they're looking for the perception of unity, not actual unity. They fight like rats in a sack like anyone else. I often don't see all the Tory infighting myself because I'm not part of the movement. So there'll be things that if the media don't report on it, I don't ever know about it. Whereas with Labour, I'm in part of forums and so on. So I know what's going on to a reasonable extent without the media having to supply me with information. But no, it's the perception of it. They need to look united so that the public will have confidence in them. The public sort of understand if you've got a warring party, they're not going to make an effective government. They get that. You know, the public don't get a lot of things about politics because most people are bored by it. But they understand the need to work as a team. So they have to be able to give them that confidence. So that's what Labour need to do. But, you know, any little... and you know, this so-called... like Labour, I mean, I said recently, although I was laughed at, honestly, I haven't seen the Labour Party so united since they were last in government. There were all sorts of arguments raging in Labour when Ed Miliband took over. It wasn't necessarily Miliband's fault as such. It was just the Labour Party had lost power after 13 years and there was a lot of soul searching. There was a lot of, you know, there were some people going, look, what we did in government was fine. We just didn't run the campaign very well. And that was my view. And there were other people going, no, you know, we lost the trust of the public. We need to look at that. And we need to completely change everything we do and completely disown our time in government. And you had this raging battle in Labour. And then Corbyn came in. It was like, bloody hell, it was open season on everyone. So actually, the Labour Party now is more united than it has been all that time. And the people who are trying to cause trouble are a very small number of people, but they have a platform. You know, so you've got mixed in there some senior members of unions. You've got the likes of Owen Jones. You've got obviously Jeremy Corbyn. So you have some people with a fairly substantial platform which can amplify. But in reality, when I look at actual forums and talk to normal Labour members, ordinary Labour members, some of whom are big Corbyn fans and some are not, and so on, but they're all just wanting to get on and form a government again. Right, well, I've missed a load of comments here. Sorry, let's try and go through. You say not against constitutional figurehead monarchy necessarily, but the UK should downsize theirs in terms of wealth and formal power. Right. Well, there's two issues there. In fact, there's three issues that you haven't said one, but I'll bring one in anyway. So in terms of the wealth, that you know, they're a wealthy family. There's plenty of very wealthy families who have been around as long as the hills, and they've amassed in centuries of being very wealthy families, massive levels of wealth. Right. That's not the state's giving them wealth. That is their wealth. So you could steal it from them. I'm not necessarily sure that that's the sort of society I would want. At the end of the day, there are very wealthy people. My attitude to that is just make sure that they pay their fair share. You know, in other words, taxation, fair levels of taxation. Make sure that there are good regulations in place for how they use their land and so on. Okay. But the family, if they were no longer the royal family, that's their family's wealth, right? It's their legally theirs. So the wealth is neither here nor there in terms of the monarchy. They get free use of what would otherwise be public facilities like Buckingham Palace, Balmoral, things like that. That's not their personal property. That's the state's property. They wouldn't get use of that, but it's also not part of their wealth. In terms of power, they shouldn't have any power at all. Now, they have very little power. They do have some which they shouldn't do. I mean, I was as surprised as anyone to learn. I only learnt it relatively recently. I was quite ashamed. I only found out relatively recently, for example, that the monarch is allowed to review laws in advance and maybe, suggest changes in their own financial interest. That shouldn't be allowed. So I'm not saying that the system as it is perfect and doesn't need reforming. But some people's attitude is, oh, this is a problem, it's unacceptable, therefore we need to throw the whole system away. It's like, well, no. I mean, you wouldn't say that about democracy. There's certain things about democracy not working in this country. The answer is to reform it, not to say, well, let's not use democracy anymore. So the monarchs should not have any power because they do not form part of government. They are a figurehead. In terms of their day-to-day work, I keep saying their day-to-day work is that of a diplomat. But in terms of slimming down the number, like the royals, yes. And actually, Charles seems to be in favour of that. That's something he's wanted for a while. So we may see that. I absolutely think it should be slimmed down. There's no need. Having a monarch's very useful. And because it's obviously a hereditary system, you also need to have it be effectively a family, the monarch being this family. But it doesn't need to be the extended family. It doesn't need to be the cousins. There's no need for any direct line, direct family, just down the old channel there. That's all it really needs to be. None of that. We don't need the hangers on. But anyway. Say the Labour Party will never be united. A fairly active Labour member. It depends what you mean, though. It'll never have everyone agreeing with each other, but neither will anything. No, nothing will. No organisation will. You look at a football team, you look at the best football teams in the world out there on the pitch, working as one seamless machine. They have their arguments in the dressing room. They have their bust-ups. I mean, Man United, when they were like dominating football, Fergie still kicked a boot into Beckham's head, didn't he? They still have their arguments. They're not always involving violence like that, but they still have their arguments. When I say united, what I mean is where the ordinary people outside the Labour movement can look at them and go, do they look like they're functioning as a team? Because the answer is yes. Squawk Box has been sued by Unite. Really? I'd not heard that. What's that about? I don't pay very much attention to Squawk Box, as you may imagine. But the thing, again, I mean, okay, it does surprise me. I was going to say it doesn't surprise me because it then helps them, because then they've always got something to moan about. But some of them are just idiots, and they just have this very narrow view of what is best. What is the best way to run the country or society or whatever it is they're interested in. And they will brook no compromise. They won't ever allow themselves to think, but actually a shitload of people don't agree with me. They're just so certain that this is the right way to do it. It's irrelevant if other people agree with them. What they actually want fundamentally is the power to force this system on everyone else. They're like Brexiteers who think if we just go ahead with it, people will see it for the benefits. They'll appreciate it. They might not now, but as soon as we did it, they will. They'll see that we were right. And they forced it. And that's what some of these people want to do. You do have quite a lot of Trotskyites on these sort of platforms. I mean, we know Novara Media, for example, but there's a few others as well. What they ultimately want, they're not interested in making arguments. They're not interested in reaching out. They're not interested in presenting their case. What they want is the power to force it on people. And they know that they're never going to be given an army to do this. They know they can't actually instigate armed uprising, which is technically what a Trotskyite aims for. But they know that that's not happening. They know we're not revolutionary Russia. So what they do instead is they try and take control of the Labour Party and wait until the Tories are so weak that somehow this Labour Party wins power, and then and like Brexit, they just think we only need to be in for a few years and then everything will be brilliant and everyone will turn around. Oh my God, they were right. Oh, this is wonderful. We'll make them president for life. But it's not how it will work. They won't win an election very easily. And if they did win an election, it's not impossible. It's not impossible. If they did win an election, they would make such an arse of it, because they don't compromise, they don't work with other people, they don't reach out, they don't explain to people why what they're doing is right. They're so authoritarian. They will just say this is the best, and they'll be as surprised as anyone when they get kicked out at the very next election. Hang on, I just spotted a Warhammer thing. Tyranids forever then. What's that about? Anyway, right. I've gone ranting on and missed a load of comments. This is all going to get very disjointed. Banker bonus cap lifted. Taxpayer foots the bill for extra help. Do the Tories accept they're losing the next general election? It's the age-old thing, isn't it? I think some do, and I think some aren't going to sit back and just wait for them to lose. You know, you've got to remember, in the Parliamentary Conservative Party, there are lots of MPs, all with different, threats and motivations. So some of those MPs feel safe. So they, let's try and split it into various types. So you've got your Tory MP who's in a very safe seat. And I know at the moment with by-elections, there's no such thing as a safe seat. But in a general election, there is. Neither the Labour nor the Lib Dems can target every single seat. So the Tories, of course, will win seats, and they'll win a lot. I mean, if they win 200 seats, that would be a disaster for them. I don't think anyone's even predicting that much. But if they won 200 seats, that's still 200 Tory MPs. So there's at least 200 Tory MPs fairly confident that their seat is safe. So then you split those into two groups. Some of them really want the Conservatives in power because they believe in it or for whatever reason. But some of them just want to be an MP. They just like feeling important, having their stables heated on the public expense by accident, or the easy salary. Some of these people, they came from very affluent backgrounds, and it's not about the money. Well, it is, but how much they can con. But for some of them, they're otherwise unemployable. They couldn't get a job paying 84 grand a year. There's no chance. 84 grand a year for some of these illiterates, not a chance in hell. So of course they like the job, and when they retire, they get a nice pension out of it as well. So they get a lifetime of pretending it's public service, but they're just serving themselves. Nice pension if they can manage to stick it out all career. I mean, it's not a bad pension if you cut it short or so. And in the meantime, they know that under the current political system, they'll keep coming back to power. They might be out of power for as little as 5 years. That might be it. It might be 10, might be 15. Doesn't matter as long as their seat's safe. So some of those may well be, accepting it. But there are hundreds of Tory MPs. Well, not hundreds. There's probably at least 100 Tory MPs, maybe going on for 150, that is desperately worried about the safety of their seat. And again, some of those are more concerned about the party because they actually are rich enough that they don't need the money. They're not bothered about being an MP for the money or the perks or anything like that. They just want the Conservatives in power. But there are also some of those who like the 84 grand a year, feeling important. And that's... those MPs are going to be aghast, and they're not going to sit back and wait for the Conservatives to lose the next election. They will do something to try and preserve their seat. You put them in a position where they're definitely going to lose their seat, they would rather do something risky that might let them retain it. Have I forgotten the bagfuls of cash given to the Prince Charles for his charities and cash from his royal family dealings are very obscure and free from scrutiny? Yeah, but as someone has actually just pointed out there, you know, there was no suggestion that he knew about it, and the person who dealt with it was fired. But I mean, again, you look at a system like that and you think, compare it to the Conservative government. So we know that similar things, the Conservatives have been doing similar things. So if we just take one issue, for example, in power, in government, the Conservatives have been getting in people to become the party treasurer. The party treasurer has to donate at least £3 million. Then after a year and a half, sometimes less, they stop being the party treasurer and they get a seat in the House of Lords. So that is the Conservatives selling seats in the House of Lords for £3 million. That's corruption. That should be stopped. Is the solution to that, A, to prevent that happening by changing the system whereby people are elected effectively to the House of Lords, even though they're not elected, or B, to scrap the whole concept of parliamentary democracy? Because this is the juxtaposition that I keep seeing when people do this. It's like, oh, this royal did this thing that I don't approve of, we should scrap the monarchy. And it's like, okay, so when a government does something you disapprove of, should we scrap democracy? You have to be consistent. You know, what you do is you look at it and say, could we reform this? Could we change it so this doesn't happen? Yes, we'll do that then. You know, if there's a system that's if there's something that's just fundamentally not useful, then fine. You know, you get rid of the system or you change it. Like the whole concept of the House of Lords, you know, needs major reform, but you need another chamber. So you don't just get rid of the House of Lords and not replace it with something, you know. But anyway, once Labour get into power, should they ban the practice of lobbying? They should certainly do what they can. The difficulty with lobbying is how easy is it to actually ban the practice? Because politicians do talk to people, you know, members of government talk to people. They will talk, for example, to heads of industries, they'll talk to business leaders, and that's fine, and they should do. Just like they should also be meeting with heads of unions. They should be meeting with, you know, bosses of charities, you know, chief constables, chief executives of NHS trusts, even though there should be no such things as NHS trusts, and so on. And so then you say to yourself, okay, so how do you stop them lobbying? Because lobbying's fine. Lobbying is just putting your case to a minister of the state. That's all lobbying is. The issue is when it's on an understanding of some sort of financial inducement or other inducement, rather than just stating your case and arguing your case. So what can you do? Well, are you going to force all ministers to have all meetings recorded and for the minutes of those meetings to be made publicly available? We also know that ministers sometimes have to have discussions that are not at all made publicly knowledgeable. So I don't know that you can end corruption in terms of lobbying like that, but you could certainly increase the level of scrutiny where financial transactions are made. So for example, I would suggest that you could limit political donations, for example. You know, if you were to take the view, maybe organisations shouldn't donate to political parties at all, including unions for Labour. No organisation should ever donate to a political party. And if ordinary people wish to donate, it should be a maximum amount per year that they can donate. You know, and that amount, let's be honest, an ordinary person doesn't necessarily need to donate more than £50. And then you can, you know, we've talked about this in the past, you can then say that political parties should get state funding according to their share of the vote. So depending on how well you do in various polling in local elections, general elections, you know, devolved parliaments for spending in devolved areas, you could deal with it that way. Try and do what you can to break the link between financial inducements and favourable activities on the parts of government. You say you don't need 2 chambers for Parliament. It's probably easier to reform than abolish it. It is very useful to have one whose role is purely to scrutinise, though. I'll tell you why as well, because you think to yourself, well, hang on a minute. So the normal process, right, for a bill going through Parliament is the government presents its bill. It should have already taken consultations before this point. It presents its bill. Then there's a debate and a vote, and the vote goes through, say. Then it goes to committee stages. So select committees pore over it. They get expert testimony and all the rest of it. So you can argue the scrutiny is there. The problem is that those select committee groups are made up largely of the party in government. You know, in our first past the post system where the government generally have a majority of MPs. So the government can make sure that they have majority control of those committees, which influences the sorts of questions asked and the sorts of conclusions drawn. So it's actually much better to have people who are separate to that to scrutinise it. The issue, of course, is where these... see, what I would have for the House of Lords is I'd have a 2-tier system. I would have both elected and unelected members. The unelected members wouldn't have a vote. They would be there for their expert testimony. So in that, you would have leaders in various fields: science, the arts, law, business, things like that. So the military. So that whenever a bill was being presented to the House of Lords, it's gone through the Commons, it's had its expert scrutiny, but not really expert scrutiny. Then the Lords presides over it, and it's their job purely to decide, to consider the expert scrutiny and to decide whether it is fit for purpose and whether the bill does what the government says it will do. So to exist purely for scrutiny. And you could have it so that the only members who vote are elected. You could have that, and it's sort of a separate system. You could stagger when the votes are. If you genuinely fixed the parliamentary term so that it was definitely 5 years, you could have, like in America, midterms, so that if the political wind changes, you don't always get the same party in control. All sorts of things you can do, you know, and that's just one thing. There's lots of things you can do. But ultimately, I am massively in favour of looking at a problem and saying, how do we apply a solution? Rather than, let's just destroy the whole system and start again. That is the Noah's Ark approach to problem solving, isn't it? You know, oh, this is all wrong. This is not what I intended. I'm going to destroy all life on Earth, apart from 2 of each animal, but not unicorns for some reason, and start again. Like, what did Eddie Iddars call it? The Etch-a-Sketch end of the world scenario. But, you know, you know what it's like? It's like my dad when he got his first PC, right? He got his first PC, and I set it up for him and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, every time it did something, I taught him how to format the hard drive. This was way back when. This is like 486s. This is before Pentiums. I taught him how to format the hard drive. So every time it did something he didn't like, he just used to wipe the hard drive and reinstall everything again. He came in at 2 o'clock he woke me up at 2 o'clock in the morning to tell me he'd done it again. You know, and it's like, no, you identify the problem and you identify solutions. Only if you have to conclude that the whole system is fundamentally at fault do you think about getting rid of it. But even then, you have to have a replacement because it still served some function. So you need something else that will serve the same function. Should devolved governments have a vote on any matters where the whole of the UK is affected? I think I've talked about this before, when it comes to a major constitutional issue like Brexit, yes, because it also affects them. You know, so if it's something that's going to affect, like, and I don't just mean like if you talk about the Scottish government, if it affects Scotland, obviously anything that is decided on a UK wide level inevitably affects Scotland as well. What I mean is if it affects the policies the way the Scottish government can form its own policies. Like the Scottish government, right? Put it this way: the MSPs, the parties that are competing in Scottish elections, fight on a particular mandate like you do in any election, right? They've got their policies. So if they have certain policies, and I'm going to say this because those policies are perfectly deliverable when they're promised, but then let's say the national government, after that, a year after that election, makes some change that now makes those policies that were promised undeliverable. Well, that's not fair, is it? I mean, so you're treading on toes there. So yeah, I absolutely think devolved parliaments should have a say on any matters that can encroach on their power. Absolutely. Which means any significant constitutional change should be agreed at the very least by a majority of, because we've got 4 national assemblies in the UK, with Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and just UK general. We don't have one for England. But anyway, have I missed my questions? Yeah, it happens a lot, doesn't it? I'm afraid. But there's a lot of questions. The problem is when I go off on one, I then unfortunately stop reading the comments. So I probably almost certainly have, if I've not read it out. But there are a lot, I'm afraid. My old man was deleting his dodgy search history. He didn't get as far as using the internet. He never got that far. All he was doing was installing pissing word processors and stuff. He was just installing software. And it would do a thing that he'd like, oh, no, this doesn't look good. So instead of actually trying to think about what the problem was or asking me, he would just go, right, delete it, start again. Never got as far as the internet. Anyway. You saw a video about how the Tories handle education earlier. If you're an education secretary, what would I put in place for schools to ensure fair education? I'd start off with some... Well, the thing is, I'd have to be an education secretary in a sensible government because I'd need the Chancellor to give me some money. Because ultimately, the way Labour did it in government was generally quite good. I would like to see further reform. The problem is, and there's different problems in different stages of our education system. Ultimately, the main problem is that we don't have an education system that is designed to allow people to reach their potential. We have an education system that allows people to get the sort of skills and qualifications that the current captains of industry want. So we let kids leave education, some of them with no worthwhile education at all. They can read and write to a basic. Obviously, if you look at the way some people, even supposedly educated people, conduct themselves on social media, their spelling, punctuation, grammar leaves a lot to be desired. And as for their numerical skills, behave yourself. But to a basic level, they can read and write and they can do some basic maths. That's essentially it. Do they understand our political system? No, not at all. Do they understand how to budget? No. Do they understand the banking system? No. Do they understand consumer rights? No. They're not taught any of these things. They're supposed to muddle through on their own. That's ridiculous. You need to spend a portion of their 14 to 15, time, the last 2 years in education, really important that they are taught these skills. They don't need to do 10 GCSEs or 8 GCSEs. I mean, it was 10 when I was doing them. You don't need to do that many. No one needs to do that many. You've got, when you're 14, you're already making a few choices anyway. Just choose. What do you want to specialise in? Choose. Make sure they'll still have to do maths. Let's say if you use 8 GCSEs, let's say one has to be maths, one has to be English. Don't have to be English language and literature. Just English language, maths, one science. That's it. The rest you choose yourself, but you don't have to do 8. Specialise. Like all I needed for what I wanted to do, I should still have done English. That's fine. English language, literature was useless to me. English, maths, and the 3 sciences. That's all I needed. I did 10 GCSEs. And the thing is, I didn't even do 3 sciences because that wasn't an option at my school. I had to do what was called, I can't remember if it's dual award or double award, but basically it was just 2 GCSEs worth. It was physics, chemistry, biology, but it was 2/3 of each one. So I missed out on science education. Knowing that I wanted to be a scientist, I missed out. So I did, what were the ones I did that were useless? Okay, I did German, and I did learn to speak German passably well, but my uncle mostly taught me that. You know, it's nice, but in this country we're not really set up to learn foreign languages. We're rubbish. So in terms of like what I usefully used it for, not at all. French, certainly not at all. I didn't like French. Geography, no. History, no. Useless. Literature, useless. I did 5 useless GCSEs. Utterly useless. You know, I'm not ignorant in any of those areas, but I could learn that myself. I didn't need it. So you can do fewer subjects. By the time, yes, do a nice broad curriculum until you're 14. Then you specialise. You're going to specialise anyway. You're old enough then to specialise. What do you want to do? So you specialise. You go down a pathway, right? Whatever it be. And then you've got the rest of the time to teach people how our electoral system works, how just general political systems work, some constitutional affairs, budgeting, you know, banking, consumer rights, useful things, for which there's no qualification. Teachers don't have to justify, you know, just make sure that they can do that. But anyway. Do I know my Oxford commas? I do. Do you know what? I don't know if that's a question to me or someone else. I do, but I'm very inconsistent with them. I am a big fan of the Oxford comma. I absolutely believe that you can get a lot of misunderstandings if you are vehemently opposed to them. But there are some situations where you don't need to use an Oxford comma and the meaning is still very clear. So basically what I would say is, I am a fan of the Oxford comma where missing it out could lead to misunderstandings. You know, someone gave a really good example. It was a very cheeky example. They put up a picture. There was Liz Truss and Theresa Coffey, and they both were holding piglets. And someone made the same statement twice. They said, "Here are 2 contented piglets, comma, Liz Truss and Theresa Coffey." Now, if you phrase it like that, that's without the Oxford comma, you're suggesting that Liz Truss and Theresa Coffey were contented piglets. Whereas if you say, "Here are 2 contented piglets, comma, Liz Truss, comma, and Theresa Coffey," with the Oxford comma, then you're saying, oh, here are 2 contented piglets as well as Liz Truss and Theresa Coffey. So, yeah. So for me, I don't use it consistently. I use it where there could otherwise be misunderstanding. So usually in a list, I think it's really important to have them. But anyway. You say some of this was taught in your PHSE classes, but that was very much down to the teacher or the school in terms of what they said. Because I've taught PHSE before as well. And you know what? Every time I've gone to teach it, you're always told, oh yeah, we've got this whole thing, it's all worked out, yeah, there's hardly any preparation to do, it's all there. And you go to it and it's like, no, there's nothing here at all. You just lied to me so that I would teach it. So you're doing it from scratch yourself. So you do have, I have worked in some schools where they've had a dedicated PHSE teacher, but again, even then, are they any good at it, or is it just the shit teacher that isn't qualified in anything else? You know, so yeah, it's, but what you need is you do need a government led, it does need to be a Department for Education led curriculum on it. Just don't attach any bloody qualifications to it. It's not needed. You'd also try and get some critical thinking skills taught as well. But anyway, are there still consumer rights in the UK? Oh yeah, we still have them. They may not belong for this world, or not for this country, but we still do have them. In Luxembourg, all kids learn Luxembourgish, French, German, English, plus sciences and math. Yeah, I mean, I've known quite a few Dutch fellas, and like 4 languages going on in their head all at the same time. It's quite impressive. But in this country, it's like if you were And I'm not saying just because it's difficult is not a reason to start it, but you need to start young. What we need to do, I mean, here's the difficulty. If I was to say as Education Secretary with a compliant Chancellor, if I was to say, look, we should really learn other languages, you know, and you need to do it from a young age, like right from year one. They need to be learning a language. And you'd probably have to pick one. You'd probably pick French, even though like I'd rather German just makes more sense. German was a much easier language to learn. French, like what? It's worse than English. Apparently not worse than Danish though. But the you know, so what you'd have to do is you'd start young, but then you need a load more foreign language teachers. You'd need a load of French teachers. It's like, well, I don't think we've got them. You know, to be teaching them in year one and year two, and then, you know, and you don't have to get them all in place all at once. You build up, so you start off with an influx of French teachers for years 1 and 2, but you where are we going to get them from? But then you'd need to keep building it up year on year as they go through school, so that and at the end of it they can actually speak French. Brilliant. And I just don't know that we would have, I don't know how it could be achieved. If I was to say, look, this is a really important policy, I want it to go ahead, you know, by all means get officials to work on a plan. I don't necessarily know that there would be one. You learned Gaelic, French, Latin, Greek and English on top of maths, arithmetic. Well, arithmetic is part of maths, behave yourself. History, modern studies. Isn't modern studies also history? Like you say, yeah, I think you're saying the same thing in two different ways. Chemistry, biology, physics and art. Arithmetic is a branch of maths, and modern studies sounds to me like history. Is there really a distinction there? Oh, you can't speak a word now. Well, just in general terms, what I will say, again, as a teacher who has taught both pre-16 and post-16 education, even good students, ones that got top grades, they were right for the exams, because the whole system is about getting you to pass the exams. As soon as I got them for A-level, it's like they'd learnt nothing. They could hardly remember anything. Useless. So yeah, because that's the other problem, isn't it? You're flooding people's heads with all these disparate subjects, and you're not really teaching them very much at all. You're just ramming their head with facts, and you forget facts. So yeah. You forget my age and was in Scotland. So I don't have an in-depth knowledge of the Scottish education system. They separated them. Okay. I don't see why you would, but okay, fine. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've talked about this before from when I've taught maths. What I would have had two different types of maths taught at like GCSE level, or the equivalent of. I would have had numeracy, and I've called it numeracy. It wouldn't just be arithmetic, but it would be the sort of numeracy that just everyone needs for everyday life. So it would include some statistics. It would include some mensuration, you know, some algebra, small amount of algebra, but it would just be the maths that just people need to do to get by in life, even if they like, you know, just work as a museum curator or something. Just the sort of maths that everyone needs. Then I'd have done the more academic stuff that would have included some algebra and some calculus and things like that as a separate, like, you know, like at A-level you have maths and advanced, you know, further maths. You sort of do. So that sort of system. So everyone does the numeracy course, but the ones who want to go into a STEM-based career, they do the extra maths as well. You could do that. So like I said, going back to my model of what I would have ideally had taught to me, get rid of your history. I'll read it in books. Most of the history I know I read in books anyway. Didn't get from my history lessons. I do remember stuff. I had a good history teacher, as well, sort of. He was interesting at any rate. I didn't do very well in my GCSE history, but he taught us, you know, a lot of interesting things. But it was too narrow. It was just the Industrial Revolution. That were it. That's all we learned. So, you know, I could have done physics, biology, chemistry, an English language, and 2 doses of maths. What else did I need? Nothing. That could have been it. And the other 4 subjects worth could have been used to teach me about our political. Well, I actually learned about that anyway because I was quite interested in politics from like the age of 6. But you know, we could have been taught the, I can't even use words, the political system, you know, financial systems, budgeting, consumer issues, all sorts of things. Some basic laws. At what point did my school ever even try and teach me the law? How was I going to be a law-abiding? Oh, we were taught the importance of being a law-abiding citizen, but not which laws we needed to abide by. There was no time for that. Anyway. Your mum was a French teacher in an FE college and her timetables dwindled down to 2 days a week. The way languages are taught is appalling. Oh, I'm quite sure. I've not known too many language teachers, I have to say. I've never shared an office with one. But I just know from having been a student, obviously years ago, the way it was taught was rubbish. It was like, you know, like when you get those old cassettes and you just repeat phrases. This phrase means this. Say it. Right, okay. Say it again, you did it wrong. That sort of thing. That's not how you should teach it, surely to goodness. But again, the problem is that the way the human brain, well, any brain, but the way the human brain works, if you don't immerse it in a language young enough, it just becomes really difficult. So if you're only introducing people to a foreign language when they're a teenager, the brain sort of developed already, and it's quite difficult. You need to do it, you ideally need to do it in their first year, but obviously the state can't do that. So, but start it when they're 5 years old. Start it when they're 5 years old, still developing. You know, it'd be much less. Écoutez et répétez, yes. No, I didn't get on with French lessons at all. Did not get on with French lessons at all. My French teacher, God bless her, was very disappointed in me. But you know, but as German just made sense. It like had rules, and it sort of made sense, and I could learn German quite easily. Once they separated the less able from the more academic, the arithmetic was dropped after O grade and maths took over. The boys doing arithmetic did good work, the girls did food. Ah, yeah, see. Again, I mean, there was a bit of that when I was at school. It wasn't enforced, but, you know, like when I did my A-levels, for example, in my physics and maths class, there were 0 girls. In my second year, there was 1, but she was someone who was resitting, so she was a year above me and repeating that second year. But in my actual year group, for maths and physics, no girls. Chemistry, no girls. Biology, mostly girls. You know, and this is the problem. And that's the same in all schools. That's not my school being weird. That is just how it is in so many schools. And it's got a little bit better now, I think, but it's how it's been. And that is no accident. That is because of the way these subjects are presented to boys and girls as they're growing up, you know. So the girls, if they had any interest in science, went and did biology. Didn't do anything else. Didn't do chemistry. Biology and chemistry go really well together. My school, they didn't do the chemistry. It's only the boys in chemistry. But anyway, right, you've distracted me with educational talk because you know it gets me. But unfortunately, we seem to run out of other things to talk about. But yeah, I mean, the German I have largely forgotten. My stages of learning German, I'll tell you what it was. So before I started learning it at school, this was, I can remember the date, hold on, 1988, there was a big Scout Jamboree, Sherwood 88 it was. And we had some Germans and some Swedes on our camp. So and I was saying we were going to start learning German, so they started teaching me a few things, so I got into it. So then I started learning it. I picked it up really quickly because it's really easy. Then my uncle who we used to visit them in summer. We used to stay a week or a couple of weeks in summer. He was Polish, but he taught me German. And, you know, so because when he, you know, knew that I was learning German, so he helped me as well. So I got quite good at it. So I'd spend a couple of weeks each summer, like with proper intensive German. He would only speak German to me. He'd speak English to other people, but he'd only speak German to me, so I had to learn. But I got into it. I was quite happy. Then, you know, there was a German channel on I can't remember what we had. I don't know if it was Sky, but whatever satellite thick telly we had, I used to watch the German, and I used to watch ones I was familiar with. So I'd watch Quantum Leap in German because I sort of knew the episodes. So you'd watch or Popeye. The German Popeye was hilarious. The laugh was like a machine gun. It was ridiculous. But anyway, so it was quite, anyway. So I learned how to speak German. I could do conversational German. And some years ago, I'd stopped learning it, but I could still remember enough. I remember playing an online game, and there was someone, for some reason, on an English-speaking server, but it was German. He didn't really speak much English. I don't know what they were doing there. And I was able to help them out because they were asking in German. I think they'd just gone to the wrong server and started a character. But, and I was able to help them out by speaking German to them. I thought, oh, I can still remember some German. But now it's almost all gone. Almost all gone. Gone. But anyway, right. Abolish Eton, long live high school. Well, the thing is, I have these conflicting things about abolishing private schools. I would absolutely abolish private schools in a heartbeat. They don't do us any good as society. They serve us no good at all. Even though I said at the beginning, would I send my kids to a private school? I'd err on the side of probably not, for practical reasons, not ideological reasons. But I'd think about it. I wouldn't, it's like almost flipping a coin type thing. And as I say, there'd be another parent who would say as well. But they don't actually serve society at all. They have zero benefit to society. They are toxic, if anything. And it's not, Eton is particularly bad. Because the main purpose of a private school is to give kids who can pay for it a better quality education. That's not the purpose of Eton. The purpose of Eton is to turn your sprog, deserving or not, into a future leader of this country. It's not always Prime Minister, though. We've had a hell of a lot of Prime Ministers from Eton. It could be as a leader of industry or something like that. But it is to create people, regardless of their worth, it's to turn them into leaders. And but other private schools have a more educational focus, but even then, it doesn't serve society's needs. So I would get rid of them in a heartbeat. But I worry about how it can be done practically. Now, it has been done. There's at least one Scandinavian country that did it a couple of generations ago. I can't remember where now. But one of our Eastern European neighbours did. East of us, that is. North of Europe, but east of us. I've forgotten who. May have been Finland. I sort of feel like Finland get a lot of things right, but it may have been Norway. I don't know. But you have to worry. You have to do it in such a way that you definitely get rid of private schools, but you can't get rid of all private education. For example, you'll still have to be able to have like sports clubs and things like that, and music. Teachers still need to ply their trade, but getting rid of actual private schools. And if someone wants to pay for a private tutor for the kid, well, there's probably not a lot you can do about that. But in terms of offering mass private education, I would absolutely knock it on the head. Oh, someone's saying Finland there. It sort of sounds right. Finland they just seem to get things right, don't they? Thought the purpose of Eton was to get people the right handshake. Well, it builds up connection. It does two things. First of all, it builds up your confidence. It's there to instill in you massive levels of confidence beyond your ability. Secondly, it's there to make sure that you have connections. And as long as you stick together, it's like the way we associate Masons, isn't it? As long as you when your fellow alumnus comes to you and wants something, as long as you are accommodating to them, they'll be accommodating to you. And this network, the old boys network is literally what it's called. The old school tie, is there to help you get ahead in life, even if you don't deserve it. Especially if you don't deserve it. The people who deserve it will make their own way in life. You send your kids to private school, yet agree the country will be better off without my hypocrite. No, because it's like anything else. I can buy products from a particular business and I might not approve of that business's ethics, but if it's the only place I'm getting it from I got something from Amazon yesterday. I get several things from Amazon. I don't like their business practices. So when I want something, if I can get it somewhere else, I tend to get it somewhere else. But there are some things I can only get it from Amazon. You know, and it's the same thing. You can wish a system away, but still engage in it because it's still it. You know, it's like taxation, isn't it? Like, I would never mind reducing income tax. I want the government to raise the upper levels of income tax. That would mean me paying more taxes. And people could say, well, you could just give that money to the government. Yeah, but it's no good me giving it to the government because I need everyone to do it. My little contribution isn't going to be enough. You know, so, you know, you're just trying to get the best. If you send your kids to private school, it's because you want your best for your kids. Now, if private schools didn't exist, you'd still want the best for your kids and you'd still do the best for your kids. You would just do it a different way. But then everyone would be on the same footing. Because if you look at private school as being on balance best for your kid and you're able to send them and you don't, then you're not in your own mind doing the best for them. Whereas if there were no private schools, you're still doing your best for them because you're not letting others get an advantage over your little Johnny or little Sarah or whatever. Anyway, you think society should be improved, yet you participate in society. Curious, quite. But we've probably come to the end of that. This was completely random. It wasn't intended to be totally random, but never mind. It was very wide-ranging. So thanks for coming on, everyone. We'll be back on again next Saturday, as far as I know. There will be again at some point in the future another Saturday where it gets changed because I'll be going down to London. I don't know whether it'd be on another day or gone altogether. But until I get the nod of when the rescheduled rejoin march is, I really don't know. But thanks everyone for coming on, and until next time, I'll see you later.